So Cindy Lowry is the executive director of the Alabama Rivers Alliance. She joined the staff in 2005 as a watershed leadership coordinator and was promoted to executive director in 2007. A native of Alabama, Cindy was born and raised, and oh boy, you might have to pronounce this one for me.
Oneonta.
Oneonta?
You can say Oneonta or Oneonta. I'm sure the
Awesome.
Native Americans said it differently than we do.
Oneonta, we'll just call it that, Alabama. She received her BS degree in wildlife science from Auburn University and her master's of public administration from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. The focus of her master's thesis was citizen participation in public policy. Cindy has more than 15 years of experience in the conservation nonprofit sector. She joined the staff of the Alabama Rivers Alliance in 2005. Oh, I think that's just a repeat. So Cindy has also been recognized as a wonderful, outstanding woman from the Metro Birmingham branch of the NAACP in 2012, named one of the Women Who Shaped the State by AL.com in 2016, and awarded an Auburn University Alumni Spirit of Sustainability Award in 2017, and has been inducted in UAB's MPA Hall of Fame this year in 2020. Ooh, that's a lot, Cindy. And Cindy is the former president also of the board of directors for Alabama Arise and was a longtime member of the board of directors for the Friends of the Locust Fork River. So we're really thankful for having you, Cindy, and all of your accolades. And Kelly Marshall joined the Alabama Rivers Alliance team in 2015, bringing significant experience in public relations and communication strategies. She has been an avid believer in and promoter of the wealth of talent, cultural history, and natural beauty throughout Alabama for many years. Prior to joining ARA, she managed the public relations campaigns and strategies for Birmingham Art Walk, Sidewalk Moving Picture Festival, now Sidewalk Film Festival, Birmingham Arts and Music Festival, and other events in Alabama. In addition to her nonprofit and event experience, Kelly also developed and implemented communication strategies for a variety of clients, including Simply Fashion, Confederate Motor Company, Village Tavern, Workplay, and many more. You might also catch her name in the rolling credits of films like Diary of a Mad Black Woman, 2 Weeks, Americano, and Open Window. She is thrilled to be able to welcome and work closely with emerging documentary filmmakers each year as part of the Southern Exposure Film Fellowship Program. And Kelly serves on the Birmingham Art Walk Board of Directors and has volunteered for the annual Arts Festival for over 15 years. She keeps busy by watching nearly everything on TV, dreaming about traveling and occasionally pretending to paint. She recently rescued a pretty amazing kitty named Rain, who Kelly likes to believe was named after the Led Zeppelin song. Super cute. Okay, I'll switch it over to you two.
As you can totally tell from the bios, Kelly is way cooler than me. But you know, I think the best lesson to come out of those bios is volunteer, 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 get involved where you can, because that's how you get into the places where you want to be and you get to do something that you're passionate about. So Kelly, you want me to just take it away for now?
Yeah, and get started.
And you guys, please do ask questions anytime you want to. I'll try not to talk without pausing so that you can't get a word in edgewise. I do have a presentation, but I'm just going to kind of flow through it. And I really want to talk to you guys about, you know, a little bit about what we do as an organization, because I think that sort of paints the picture of how you advocate for clean water in Alabama. But also we'll talk a little bit about ourselves and how we got where we are. And then, of course, Kelly is going to get to share a lot more in a moment about the Southern Exposure and some of the communications and media work that she does. That's so important to our mission in getting the word out. So with that, figure out how to move my slides forward. There we go. All right, I like to start with this picture because a lot of people think when you work in nonprofit, particularly in the conservation or environmental organization, that this is your regular day at the job. This is not my regular day at the job. unfortunately, I don't get to do this every day and call it work. We do maybe once or twice a year get to get out on the rivers and call them work. But in order to protect clean water, I spend a lot more time in a setting like this. This is our conference room in our office. Kelly's in there today. You can see that. And we do a lot. We spend a lot more time in meetings, collaborating around the conference table with our staff and with partners, and certainly working on the computer, as we all have to do these days so much in order to do our work. But it's still fun. It's still rewarding because we do, sometimes it's a job, I'm not going to lie. Every job's a job sometimes. But we do get to do something that's fulfilling and that we care about every day. So even when things get really hard and tiring, we're reminded how much we love our mission and how important it is. So just a little bit about how I got here. She gave you that long, or that little bit of background about me, and I did get some degrees in order to get here. But my main path was, I went to college. I was privileged enough to have opportunity to go to college, and I wanted to go to college. I like school. I was one of those people that like school. And my family had all gone to Auburn University, so there really was, I didn't know there were any other schools. There's no real thought about which school I would go to. That was just where we went. And so I went to Auburn, and I came from a really small town, the one that's hard to pronounce, Aniana. It's about 4,500 people, just north of Birmingham. Just kind of, it's in the Locust Fork watershed. It's a beautiful, kind of in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, a beautiful part of Alabama, but not a whole lot of broad, diverse thinking going on when I was growing up. So when I got to school, I was just, the only thing I knew were things like doctor, lawyer, teacher. I just didn't really have a broad sense of what the opportunities were. So I started out in pre-med. That didn't work out. And then I decided that, or then I kind of stumbled into some classes that I really enjoyed about the environment and some biology classes, and decided after talking to my advisor, and I do encourage you, if you do choose to go to college, if you've already gone or you're already in college, talk to your teachers, talk to your advisors. They do have some wisdom to share. And found my way into wildlife science, which was a very fascinating degree. It was learning about all the different plants and birds and species, and what they need in order to thrive and survive. And it was just really eye-opening to me to see how many different things we have here in Alabama. But the major was geared towards being a game warden or managing land for hunting, things like that, because it was Auburn, and at that period of time, that's really what they geared most of their. We didn't really talk about the environment much or protecting the species much. So when I got out, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I volunteered for an organization that I had gone to when I was with my church for years in high school. I volunteered for a Appalachia Service Project, which was building homes for low-income communities in the Appalachian region. And I went to Kentucky for a little while and did that. And I actually ended up working for the power company, a grant from the power company up there to weatherize homes. So that was sort of getting my foot in that environmental world. I knew I wanted to do something environmental. I just didn't really know how to do it. So I did that for a little while. And then when I came back to home, I really started looking at grad school, because I feel like that's what for me and my where I was at the time in my 20s, I needed grad school to help me focus. I wasn't sure. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have some of the skills I thought I needed to be able to find a job in the field I wanted. And I was fortunate enough not to have to, I worked at part-time jobs and other types of jobs, but to really find the career I wanted, I needed to go to graduate school. And public administration was really interesting because it is a very broad degree. If you're not familiar with that one, it's nonprofit management, it's government, how to work for government, a lot of public policy. And I really found something exciting. I really found that I was a policy wonk. Who knew? I majored in science in undergrad, and I figured out that I was a policy wonk in grad school. So I love the public policy aspect, and that's really and it was not an environmental school. It was not a concentration in environment. That wasn't there either. But I just did all my research on the things that I cared about, and that ended up finding my way into internships with the Cobb River Society and my first job with the Wildlife Rescue Center at Oak Mountain. And so that's just kind of how I got into it. I started volunteering as a board member for the Friends of the Locust Fork River. They're an all-volunteer organization that cares about the creek, and the more people I met and the more I got into the river world, the more I knew that was where I wanted to be. And then when jobs came open, I applied for them and ended up at the Rivers Alliance. So it wasn't a straight path by any means, and I just kept my eyes open and my heart open to where life was leading me, and took the initiative when their opportunities were there. So that's what I would encourage you guys to do as you're thinking about what you want to do. All right, I like to start talking about Alabama before I start talking about the Alabama Rivers Alliance. And Alabama is super cool when it comes to rivers. We have the only state seal in the entire country that has rivers on our state seal. Most of the state seals have like eagles and shields and those kind of graphics. We have the rivers, and it's because our founders realized how important rivers were to our state, but the economy and just the people and the communities of our state rely so much on water, and we have such an abundance that I think they realized that early on. Now we've taken this logo you see over here and made it we modified a slogan that some Alabamians have had that probably isn't very nice slogan, that we dare defend our rights. We're all about states' rights here in Alabama. We changed it to be, do we dare defend our rivers? We think that's a much better way to do it, or to say it, and it's a great battle cry for us when we're talking about defending our rivers from the threats that face them, and protecting clean water for everybody here in Alabama. So we use this, and our partners use this as well in our work sometimes when so that's the communications piece, the media piece. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Kelly.
Yeah, so I would just want to add, this happened before I was with the organization, but this logo was created and an entire media campaign was created around this logo for our partners to use as well. So hashtag Defend Rivers. We have shirts, all kinds of swag that has Defend Rivers, and it's really become not only just Alabama Rivers Alliance, but kind of a call across the nation to protect our rivers. One interesting thing, I think Carrie will find it interesting as a psychology major, we ordered stickers one year that was both Defend Rivers and Save Rivers. And so when we would be out in the community or talking with people, it was kind of a psychological test of how to talk and communicate as to which one they wanted. Do you want to defend or save? It's kind of the passive or non-passive way of communicating. So we've always thought that was kind of interesting, which way you would side. So, but it continues to be a great media campaign. It continues to be a great hashtag. We use it on Instagram and Twitter mainly, less on Facebook, but if you check out that hashtag, you can see a lot from us and our partners, but then people across the country have started using it as well.
I'm curious, what did most people choose?
It's really kind of split down the middle. I'm definitely a defend, and Cindy's definitely a save. It's really kind of down the middle.
Yeah, it's fun. All right, so this is my favorite thing to tell people. If you don't, and you probably already know this because you're working in conservation already and you're doing restoration. So you've heard the term America's Amazon used for Alabama. Probably there's an actually documentary film created by Ben Raines from down there in Mobile about this concept of how biodiverse Alabama is, and where we get the name America's Amazon. We're number one and most of that biodiversity is water. It's fresh water, which is why I love to show the slide. We have over 132,000 miles of rivers and streams. We're number one in freshwater fish, snails, turtles, mussels, crayfish. We have a great treasure when it comes to biodiversity to be grateful for and also to protect. So it's a big job. All right, so next I'd like to talk about how we use our water in Alabama, which sometimes surprises people, particularly if you're not from this state. Most people, a lot of states, their largest water use is agriculture irrigation. But if you look here at this little graph, the agriculture irrigation is a pretty tiny piece. It's only 3% of our water withdrawals for the state annually. But this big old orange piece is industry and thermoelectric and mining. And 83% of that 88% is actually thermoelectric. And what that means is these coal plants that we have all over the state that generate our electricity, coal and nuclear require a whole bunch of water to cool these big old towers that are generating steam to generate the electricity. So they have to pull it out of the river, and you can see here they're located on the side of the river, and they're pulling out millions of gallons a day in order to do this. So you can take that for what you will. My point that I usually just try to make is that our electricity grid is heavily dependent on water. It is a large use of our water. And then, of course, public supply and residential is an important use. So drinking water, we all know that that's what we use water for, and that's a very important part of it. And 70%, over 70% of the population of Alabama gets their water from surface water, which is rivers, streams, lakes, bays. So that's why when we talk about protecting our rivers, we're not just talking about protecting the biodiversity, we're talking about protecting the water for people and for public health. So because we definitely get most of our water, drinking water, from rivers. People also fish. People fish for fun, but people also fish for their, for their food. And particularly, I think in COVID-19 crisis, people are losing their incomes, and they're really going to start. There's evidence that shows that Alabamians eat the fish they catch more than other states anyway. And then in this time, I think they'll probably be doing that even more. Another really cool use of our waters is outdoor recreation. This is probably the one that when you ask people why they care about rivers, this is what usually, we've done some polling, and this is what comes to mind. Whether it's paddling or fishing or boating or swimming, it's a pretty big pastime in Alabama. You can see from this Outdoor Industry Association report that 55% of Alabamians do outdoor recreation each year. And it produces, it generates $14 billion in consumer spending annually in Alabama, as well as $857 million in state and local taxes. And there are actually more jobs in outdoor recreation in Alabama than there are in the auto manufacturing industry, which I think is a very interesting statistic, because we know that auto manufacturing is talked about a lot, probably a lot more than outdoor recreation is, so, as a job and revenue generator. So that's just some of the ways that we use our water. Now, this is the slide I like to put up to talk to people about how, when they try to tell me that environment is a political issue, or they ask me if environment is a political issue, and how in the world do we protect the environment in a conservative state and things like that, I say roses are red, violets are blue, and clean water is important for all of you. We do get involved in advocating for clean water with elected officials, but it doesn't matter who they are, what their party is. It's really all about, everyone cares about clean water, so it's all about finding out where they are and where they connect to rivers and where they connect to water. And so we definitely work across the aisle in trying to protect water. All right, any questions so far? All right, so the mission of the Alabama Rivers Alliance, we're a statewide organization. You guys have probably talked to some of the, or some of the groups down in Mobile. Well, we work as an alliance. We try to build allies and partnerships all across the state and connect the groups that are working in specific communities or specific waterways, specific watersheds, connect them to each other and build those partnerships around common issues, as well as empowering citizens, which is educating and engaging citizens in the work to protect clean water. And I'll talk to you more about how we do these things. And then advocating for sound water policy and its enforcement. And so those, the partnerships and the citizen empowerment is the key to getting good policy and keeping good policies and getting them enforced. So that all works together. We have partners all across the state. This is just kind of an example. Any given time, we say about 50 plus partners, because groups kind of form and go away. But most of our partners are all volunteer, as I mentioned before, like Friends of the Locust Fork River and community groups that may have a issue that they're concerned about that they want to fight. And a bunch of citizens get together and they form an organization. We will help them do that if they want to, and help them organize and figure out what to do to deal with the issue that they're facing, or just to protect their creek because they love it. But we also have 8 river keepers in the state, which is a specific type of organization. They're part of the National Waterkeeper Alliance organization, and they each are specific to the watershed. So there's Black Warrior Riverkeeper. You guys have Mobile Baykeeper down there. There's the Cahaba Riverkeeper, Coosa Riverkeeper, Tennessee Riverkeeper. There's a bunch of them in the state, and they each have to have applied for this official riverkeeper status. They have to have a designated keeper to patrol the river, and they have to have at least one staff that makes a living wage. So those are specific types of partners that we have, the all volunteer versus the staffed organizations. So when we do our work, we get to work on some fun issues that are positive and proactive when it comes to policy. And then of course we have to work on the reactive issues that are challenging and reacting to stuff that's happened already that we have to get fixed to protect water. And this is one of our proactive campaigns. It's really fun and exciting. And when Kelly tells you a little more about Southern Exposure, she can get into that in just a minute. But we created a film to launch this campaign, and it's we're trying to get the Little River, which is up in Northwest Alabama. It's just one of these really pretty, pristine rivers that we have in the state, designated as a National Wild and Scenic River. And we only have one wild and scenic river in Alabama, which is surprising because we have so many beautiful rivers. And the designation was controversial back in the 80s and 90s, you know, and it's still maybe a little bit in some places. People don't want you to tell them what you can do on their property, and that's what they think this does. But it really just adds some layer of protection for the river and gives the communities around, the landowners around, a national designation they can really promote for ecotourism and things like that. And the Little River Waterkeeper is our partner on this campaign. And then there's the bad, dirty issues that we have to deal with. You guys may have seen this picture, or you may have seen this plant. It's up on the Mobile River, right above Mobile, upstream, I should say, from Mobile. This is the Berry Steam Plant. Generates electricity, and this huge thing right here that looks like a pond is actually, this whole thing is where they store their coal ash. And coal ash is nasty stuff that's generated when you clean out the stacks, those tall things over there. When they generate electricity and they shoot smoke out the stacks, the Clean Air Act requires that they scrub the bad stuff out of it, and that all that ash then has to go somewhere, and it gets stored in wet ponds like this. And it's got heavy metals and arsenic and all kinds of contaminants that are bad for public health. And it has not been regulated very well in the past. And when the Kingston, Tennessee disaster happened a long time ago, 2008, that everybody woke up and said, oh no, we need to regulate this stuff. And then the power company still doesn't really want to regulate it. They don't want to move it. They don't want to have to go through that process. But right now it could be flooded. It could get into the river. It could go down into Mobile and really cause, according to Mobile Baykeeper, more damage than even the BP disaster did. So it's definitely something that we work on with all the river keepers in the state. They have coal plants on all of their watersheds. And it's also been found to be contaminating groundwater in at least 22 states, and that includes Alabama. So every one of the coal plants was fine. The power company was fine for contaminating groundwater underneath these coal ash ponds. So it is definitely a problem that needs to be dealt with. And we're all working on that. We also work to try to help people be more aware of where pollution is. One of the biggest challenges to people wanting to address pollution in our waterways is making sure that they even know it's there, and particularly when it comes to protecting public health. So the Coosa Riverkeeper is a really big partner of ours, and they've been very active on their watershed, which is a series of dams which create a bunch of lakes. And so the lakes are where people go fishing, and they have a lot of fishermen on their river. It's a big, and many of those are subsistence fishermen feeding their families. And so when they started recognizing how many people don't know about the fish consumption advisories that we have in our state, and then you can see here in 2019, 65% of the tested water bodies in Alabama were deemed dangerous and included consumption advisory. Now, some places that means you can't eat the fish at all. In other places, or certain species of fish, and then other places it means that they're limited to a certain amount of fish of that species per week or per month. And it's a 30-page report that's buried on the health department's website. So we've been working with the Coosa Riverkeeper to get that information more accessible. One of those ways is this hotline that we sponsor with them, so fishermen can go and just press the number of the watershed they're in and find out where the fish consumption advisories are and what they are on that water body.
I'd like to add to that. One of the reasons we came up with this with Coosa Riverkeeper is the organization Coosa Riverkeeper went out and did surveys of the fishermen that were on these lakes and just asked them, do you know that it's not safe to eat these fish? Do you know, how do you get your information? All of these, tools that you learned in media to ask the right questions to figure out what we need to do to support them and help the fishermen. And that's when it was determined that, so many of our fishermen who rely on this food to feed their families don't have access to the internet, aren't going to search and search and search on the website to try to find this 30-page document that is so, dense and hard to understand. Even for us who work in this every day, it's hard to understand and find. So we thought having, a 1-800 number that was toll free would give these fishermen a better way to access this information that will help, hopefully help them make better decisions about the fish that they eat. So that's how we came up with the hotline idea.
And Kelly's been really helpful in the PR side of this and the communication side of this to get the word out. And the health department, we have some success in this. Just the Coosa Riverkeeper and the Blackwater Riverkeeper in our organization has met multiple times with the health department, also with the Department of Conservation who issues fishing licenses, and with a legislator that's taken an interest in this issue too. And the health department is now working on getting out more graphically friendly, graphically easy to access, like with pictures of the fish, and instead of just the report and a spreadsheet, like pictures of the fish you're not supposed to eat and how much, something that's going to be more accessible to everybody. And they're going to put them in health clinics and in libraries and work with us to get them disseminated around the state. So that's positive movement on that one. All right, what about climate change? All of the work that we do is exacerbated and or relates to climate change. It is not something that we don't work on. It sort of underpins everything in the environmental world. We know that our waterways are some of the first impacted environmentally from climate change, whether it's from extreme flooding, more increased droughts we're having, as you can see in these photos, as well as just the storms that you see down on the coast, the warming temperatures that are creating more invasive species and potentially more disease and public health issues. And particularly the flooding in recent years. In the last couple of years, we've had multiple 100-year floods in Alabama, and it is putting a major strain on the infrastructure for wastewater treatment and drinking water, but particularly the wastewater treatment infrastructure. There's multiple sewer spills and overflows because of the flooding. And so many of the communities that are struggling with aging infrastructure and challenges with flooding, they don't have the money to upgrade their systems, their infrastructure systems. So there's a financial and poverty issue on top of the environmental problems and public health problems as well. So we've been advocating at the federal level with multiple groups from all over the country to get more funding to these low-income communities that or any communities that are having trouble upgrading their systems. And that funding is coming through. There's some that's already happening, that's already been allocated, and there's more discussions and more bills to try to get, and particularly grant programs, because one of the challenges with the programs that have been in place for a long time is that the funding comes through a loan from like an Alabama Department of Environmental Management or someone like that, and the communities that need it the most can't get it because they can't show how they'll pay it back. So making sure that this funding is coming through grant programs as well, so that the communities that need it the most are getting it, is something we've advocated for. And then we're also trying to get a water management plan for the state. It's been a very huge political lift and has had some momentum at times, and right now does not have support of the governor, so we do not have any momentum right now. We're trying to keep the conversation going, but that's a plan to try to address how we're going to deal with water shortages when we're in drought situations, how we resolve water conflicts, whether they're between other states or between upstream and downstream users. The only thing we do, we have no regulation of water withdrawals right now, no permitting for water withdrawals. You can just do whatever you want. We have no conservation and efficiency incentives, and we have no state oversight for just accountability of water use and for making sure that there's enough water staying in our streams to protect those ecosystems and all those water uses that they're required to produce for us. So the water management plan is a huge undertaking. It's a very long-term effort, but we're going to keep on trying. Many other states have done it. We're kind of behind the 8 ball on that one. So what can we do about climate change and really many of these other issues, but particularly climate change? I went to a great conference in Birmingham this past year, and the main message from the scientists who are really talking about climate change is to talk about it. They've done study after study that's shown that people don't think it's going to impact them. They understand that it's here. They think it's going to impact somebody, but just not they don't think it's going to impact them. So they're not talking about it. And so there's very little knowledge about it and very little understanding. So the first step is just to talk about it. Talk about what you believe about it. Talk about what you know, what you've read, what's important to you, and where you're seeing impacts. That's what I'm doing. I'm talking about it. All right, Southern Exposure.
Hey.
This is our flagship, wonderful program that we love so much, that is really helping us spread the word about all of the issues that are facing our rivers and the work that's being done to protect them. And I'm going to let Kelly tell you about this program.
Yeah, so Southern Exposure was created about 9 years ago by the Southern Environmental Law Center and a couple of donors who recognized that film was such an important medium. As we all know, it looks like, I'm not trying to make assumptions here, but it looks like everybody's pretty young on this call. So you guys have kind of been around the social media world since it's existed. Cindy and I were around before it. But film is used so much on social media and in so many other ways that one of our donors and one of our great advocates recognized that we really need to be creating these films to raise awareness, build some education pieces, and help explain what some of these issues are in a better way. That's one prong of it. Another prong is, as we all know, when we see something that is familiar, it might make us more apt to want to protect it. It might make it seem more urgent, all of these things that film can do. So we took the program over 2.5 years ago from Southern Environmental Law Center in 2018. What we do is we do a great big application, call for entries or call for applications throughout the country in grad programs and undergrad programs, as well as people that are self-trained. And bring the filmmakers into Alabama, emerging documentary filmmakers into Alabama. They live here, they work here, they hang out here for 6 weeks, and they each create one short film about an environmental issue that either we ourselves are working on at ARA or our partners are working on, or it could be a celebratory piece of a person who has really accomplished some amazing things in the world of environment, or celebrating a great space, or if we need a piece that we want our elected officials to see to kind of understand an issue better, that might be a topic as well. So we work on the program year-round with our partners to develop what those topics are going to be. Then we give the fellows those topics, and they're off and running. If any of you have ever made any type of promotional piece that involves video, you know how laborious that can be. These fellows do this in 6 weeks from beginning to end. Some of the films are 20 minutes long. It's really amazing what they're able to do in those 6 weeks. This year is going to be a little bit different with COVID. We're not going to bring the film fellows to Alabama, unfortunately, but they're going to virtually work on these films. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. We'll have film crews on the ground here in Alabama from folks that live here and former fellows of the program. They'll gather all the footage, and then our film fellows will basically be virtual producers and editors from their own homes It's going to be very interesting. I keep saying I'm very excited to see what the creative community comes up with while we're all forced inside and without a lot of outlets and activities to get to. So yeah, and actually it starts on Monday. The Film Fellows will begin the film topics and production, and we'll do workshops for them and all sorts of stuff. And that starts on Monday, and our new batch of films will be ready by August. And when we release the films, usually we have a big giant premiere here in Birmingham, and then we take the films on the road to all the communities in Alabama and beyond. We submit them to film festivals, all those things. This year will probably look a little bit different, but all of our films that we've done thus far are available at southernexposurefilms.org. And as of last year, they're available on Roku and Amazon Fire. So all you have to do is search for the Southern Exposure channel. I'd love for you guys to check them out. Let us know what you think. And we're always open to topic ideas. One of the ones that we really, really wanted to do this year was kind of highlighting the youth involvement and activism for climate change, because that's just been with Greta and all the other things that have been happening prior to COVID. We thought that would be great. We're not doing that this year just because there aren't those things happening this summer. But anyway, I certainly invite you to check out the films and let us know what you think. Anything to add there, Cindy? Or questions?
I don't think so, but I just opened the chat and I realized there's some questions in there from maybe some of the other topics we talked about or just other questions. So I'm okay with, we can keep going on our presentation in a minute, but I'm okay with going back to some of those questions that were asked earlier, if that's cool with y'all.
Yeah, that's great.
So the first question was, how is Alabama's attempt at criminalizing environmental protesting affecting your organization, or how is it affected? I'm guessing you're talking about the legislation that was introduced this past year. Cody, could you clarify, or are you talking about what's going on right now?
A little bit of both.
Okay. Okay, well, there was a bill this past year that was in the legislature before they shut down because of COVID that had some very concerning language in it around a couple of things. One, broadening the definition of critical infrastructure to mean just about any industry, any industrial site. And they were trying to criminalize drone footage around that, as well as they had some vague language about protecting the right to protest, in the sense of it said this does not prevent the peaceful assembly of and show of grievances or something like that. But there was some concern that, because that was a national bill that was going around, I mean, it was a state bill, but it was going around to multiple states. There were some concerns that part of the motivation of that bill was to criminalize protesting around pipelines and other things that they were calling critical infrastructure. So we did get involved in advocating against that legislation, and also in trying to get it amended. We had the most luck with the drone part. Many of our riverkeepers and other organizations use drone photography to show evidence of pollution problems in places where you might not be able to otherwise see it. And so this was a really big issue, and we were able to get that part changed and pretty much taken out. The only thing left in there was if the drone has a weapon on it, then it would still get you in trouble, but otherwise we got that part taken out. But I think the protest language was still intact the last time I saw it, but because they shut down, that bill didn't go anywhere. As far as what's going on now, and the arresting of protesters, we do not support that. Obviously, having a healthy democracy and democratic participation and protesting is part of that, is a huge part of environmental advocacy. And our organization does not, I'm not to say we don't support arresting protesters. We definitely support the protesting and what's going on there. We don't support the arresting of the peaceful protest. We don't typically organize protests. It's not something that we've been the leaders of very often in the state. We are, as a statewide organization, we feel that it's the community. It should come up from the community and the frontline folks to decide, when they're ready to do uprising and protest and make their voice heard. And then we support those efforts. We participate. We participate in the Poor People's Campaign protests that they do and direct actions that they do as a partner. So we definitely support that as a tactic for raising awareness as well as having your voice heard to elected officials. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that did more than answer my question. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. The next one was, how often does our organization participate in lawsuits against companies and people that negatively impact the environment? We do participate in lawsuits. We file them and we sign on or intervene when necessary. It's not our first choice. Obviously, it's expensive and it's not usually a long-term solution. It's usually more of a stop what's happening now so that we can then decide what the long-term solution is. But when necessary, when the law is being broken and no one's doing anything about it, we have definitely participated in lawsuits. Our most recent victory was on the Coosa River. We participate in hydropower relicensing of the hydropower dams that happens about every 30 to 40 years. The dams get relicensed by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they have to be show in the license how they're going to operate the dam in a way that is at least balances the different uses of the river, including the downstream ecosystem. And we participated in that relicensing as a stakeholder for about 15 years, trying to get them to do studies to protect endangered species, to have better flow regimes and better dissolved oxygen and all kinds of wonky stuff. And they never did what we asked. They never did anything that we asked. And so we challenged that license, and we won in a DC court, a huge victory that made them have to go back to the drawing board with their environmental impact statement. It was 7 dams all on the Coosa River, and they had to go back to the drawing board, the power company and the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to redo that license and hopefully come out with a better result. So that's one example of recent. And we're also challenging right now, legally challenging with Black Warrior Riverkeeper and Coosa Riverkeeper, I think, some new regulations that ADEM created around biosolid land application of human sewage on crops. So that's another issue we can get into later. So we do that. It is a tactic. It is a tool. It's not the only one, and we try to do other collaborative and or policy changes that we think are longer term. But when we have to, we do. Then do we partner with other local nonprofits, including state organizations, on stormwater and stream restoration projects, or is that the scope for riverkeepers? Stormwater tends to be more of a local issue. It's definitely a statewide problem. It happens, all the issues that are surrounding stormwater happen all over the state, but the regulations are more local. Their permits are city municipalities hold the permits or counties hold the permits. So those do tend to be led by the riverkeepers or the local watershed organizations. And as far as restoration projects go, those are, since we're an advocacy group and we have a really small staff, there's only 4 of us, we're not getting, and because we do so much advocacy, we're not getting government funding, which is typically what's required to get the level of funding you need to do big restoration projects. So we love when rivers are restored, and we support those activities, but it's usually larger organizations like the Nature Conservancy or an actual city government that gets those funds to do those restoration projects. But where we can, we partner or we encourage partnering with the local community groups that are on the ground when they're doing those restoration projects. Okay. Carrie says, when you guys hopped on that Illinois webinar, they were discussing their water management plan. So there you go, that's about water management. And then Austin, since film has been shown to be successful in reaching more audiences, has using more of the arts been considered to bring more focus to environmental issues? Locally, we had glassblowing professor Renee Culler make a series based on the Delta. Street art has been used to highlight cultural and social issues, but I can't say I've seen it utilized for conservation matters locally. Kelly, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's great. I would love to see that glass blowing. I love that. It's a conversation that's happening. Just as an example, one of our board members is heavily involved in the arts. She's an artist herself, and she keeps having these dinners where she invites the environmental people that she knows and artists together to have dinners and talk about other ways to marry these two things together. We think they do go hand in hand. we're all just trying to kind of figure that out right now. I love what you say there about the street art that is in Birmingham right now. Street art is just all over the place, and it just really makes you, it's just a wonderful thing to see, in my opinion. So we, I think in Mobile, you guys have some really cool art around your storm water drains. Is that right? Am I remembering that right? There's like some mosaic art to bring attention to the where your water drains. I think that's really cool. It always gets my attention when I'm in Mobile. So there are certainly ways we can do a better job of incorporating art in the environment, but it is a conversation that's happening.
And it's really the motivation. I mean, the biggest benefit, I guess, and motivation of the Southern Exposure program is to use that medium to get the word out in a way, it's a medium that people, a broader audience identifies with than just, talking or brochures or whatever other letters to the editor, things like that. So that's what's excited me the most is our ability and our work to disseminate the films and show the films and get them out there in the world after they're created.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We got a little bit more on this PowerPoint. Y'all want me to keep going? But I'm happy to talk if that's what you want to do. All right. We wake up PowerPoint. So we have some events that we normally have when there's not a pandemic that we would love for y'all, if you stay in Alabama, to participate in. Our annual Alabama Water Rally Conference is held every year. It's a Friday to Sunday. It's kind of a typical conference in the sense that you have breakout sessions and great speakers, some academics, some local frontline community members, some grassroots leaders doing the sessions. We have plenary sessions where everybody gets together and brainstorms and learns from each other. We have great networking opportunities there. We have fun as well. We usually have music and things like that in the evenings, bonfires, all that fun stuff. And it's we offer scholarships to anyone who wants to attend. We don't want money to be a factor in someone not attending. So we have sponsors allow us to be able to offer generous full scholarships to anyone that needs it. So keep an eye out for that. We had to postpone this year's. It's always in March, and we want to. We're going to try to do a virtual version of it sometime in the fall. We're not quite sure exactly what that's going to look like. We want it to still have the sort of Alabama Water Rally feel that our other one does, but so we're trying to kind of brainstorm that right now. We have a lobby day once a year. Rivers of Alabama Day is a state designated day, designated by the state legislature on the second Tuesday of April every year. So we use that as our lobby day because the legislative session meets on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays during the session, usually from like January, February to April, May. So that's when we bring everybody to Montgomery, or people come to Montgomery and join us to go and talk to our elected officials and about water and about what's important. If there's a bill that we're pushing, we talk about that. If there's not, we just talk to them about water and our rivers and try to get them to care and know more about it. Not that they don't care. Most of them do. And then we have our Wild and Scenic Film Festival screenings, which is a national film festival that goes on tour into different states, and we bring it to Birmingham, Montgomery, and Huntsville right now. And we've talked about doing one in Mobile and maybe with Mobile Baykeeper, so maybe we'll get that happening in future years. And we show our Southern Exposure films there, but we also show a suite of national documentaries that are part of the national one on tour. And our Southern Exposure films have also been accepted into that National Film Festival, which the main one's in California, and we've had some of the Southern Exposure films accepted into that film festival, and then they've gone on tour to other states. So we're getting the word out just beyond Alabama even. Kelly, do you want to say anything about those?
No, you did a great job.
And then since we had a crisis pandemic, we had to start working remotely, and we had to cancel our in-person events. We started a weekly Zoom conversation or Zoom series that we call Water is Life. And we've been doing it for several weeks now. We're highlighting the different watersheds of the state and the partners, some of the partners that are working in those watersheds. It's an hour-long conversation, Tuesdays at noon. We would love for y'all to be on it. Next week is going to be about the Sipsey Fork up in the northwestern part of the of the state, which is also the Sipsey Wilderness Area, which has a really cool history. But you have to tune in to find that out. I'm not going to tell you today. And we're going to be talking with a group called Wild South that works in the in national forest areas and tries to protect national forests and wilderness areas. And they are based up in Florence, in the Florence area. And you can get on our email list by going to alabamarivers.org, or just send your email to one of us. And that's how you can get information about registering for those calls. And then, of course, what you can do is be aware of the water that you use and the rivers and creeks around you. Learn where your drinking water comes from and where it goes to, because that's both important. Get involved with your local river group if there's one in your area, or community group that is working on environmental and/or justice issues, because they're very much interrelated. Talk to your friends about these issues, and talk to your elected officials. Even if you see them in the store, if you see them at church, if you see them at the local restaurant, if you know them, please talk to them. If you don't know them, get to know them. They make very important decisions, and they don't hear from us about the environment enough, or from their constituents about the environment enough. And think about the environment when you vote. We can't support candidates as a nonprofit 501c3, but we can certainly say vote and figure out what your candidates stand for. And then we'd love for you to be support the Alabama Rivers Alliance in whatever way you can, through volunteering or joining as a member, getting on our email list, and following us on social media, and staying involved in the work that we do. And then there's a couple more questions over here, which is, are there any volunteer opportunities? So we have some volunteer opportunities. We're not a huge volunteer-based organization, because we do so much policy work and partnership work that we don't do the actual field work as much. So hands-on volunteering is stuff, usually ends up being stuff like research on our policy issues, or volunteering in our office, volunteering to help us out with events, help us to put on screenings for the Southern Exposure films. There are various ways you can volunteer. They're not going to be your go out and test water or get out in that environment kind of things, as much as they are with more of the advocacy side of our work. But if that excites you, then please get in touch with us, and we can figure out a way to get you plugged in. And then, do we partner with Conservation Alabama? Yes, we do. Conservation Alabama is the League of Conservation Voter organization in the state. And so anytime we're working on legislation, they have a lobbyist in the legislature. They have history of knowledge about how it all works. And so they are very much a key partner when we're doing legislative advocacy, for sure.
Yeah, I just asked that because I'm in the office right now, and they're stationed diagonally across from us, Brittany and Tammy. They're not here right now. They're still working from home, I think. But you guys, it sounds like you guys do a lot together. So I'll definitely share their contacts as well, because they'll be able to, if anybody's interested in volunteering. I know they have some volunteer opportunities as well. They're a little bit, I don't know. Can you guys talk about it? They're, I guess, more policy related.
Yeah, so they have a 501c3, which is a way, that's how we're designated as nonprofit as well. But they also have a 501c4 and a PAC, which means that they can support candidates. They can endorse candidates that run for office. They can get a little more involved in elections than we can't get involved in elections at all. We can advocate and lobby around issues to our legislators and educate them, but we can't get involved in elections. And so they can do both. They can lobby, and they do lobby around legislation and policy issues, but they also can get involved in elections and can support candidates. So that's a powerful tool to be able to support a candidate and endorse a candidate and get that environmental community behind them, but while they're trying to get elected. Because then if they get elected, then they think of us as they know that we supported them, we being the environmental community, not the Rivers Alliance. And so Conservation Alabama can play that role. They also bring us together, several groups together that work on issues, and in the last couple of years have been creating an agenda, kind of a conservation agenda to show what our priorities are that we're all working on, to educate legislators about that and give them sort of the contacts for each organization that's leading on those issues, so they can, and the experts on those issues, so they can call us if they need information. Yeah, so they definitely, and they have, what else was I going to say? You said something about volunteering and it made me think of something, and now I can't remember what it was.
Mobile Baykeeper?
No, I was just thinking about Conservation Alabama, but I can't remember what I was going to say now. It's fast, whatever that was. But yeah, they do great work. And I know what I was going to say is just in general, you know, there's a lot of different environmental organizations. It may seem like, why are there so many? And, you know, you guys all competing with each other? And I just want to encourage you to not think that. We do all work together really well. We try to understand where each other's strengths are and where each other's skills are, and not duplicate each other's efforts, but partner and to make us all stronger. And you know, with all those rivers and streams and waterways, and with as uphill a battle sometimes as it is to protect the environment, it takes all of us. And I think we have a really strong community here in Alabama working, a movement here in Alabama working on the environment, and a lot of great organizations. So I encourage you to get to know as many of them as you can and what they do, and figure out which ones, you know, speak the most to you, and support those and plug in with the ones that speak the most to what you're interested in. What's my favorite river in Alabama? Well, can I say two different ones? So my river that I grew up on was the Locust Fork River up in Blount County, and it is beautiful. It is the Locust Fork of the Black Warrior, so it's one of the three forks that form the Black Warrior River. And it's got a lot of white water in the wintertime. It's got boulders and big banks, and it's kind of the foothills of the Appalachians, as I mentioned before. It's got some great places to wade and fish and swim. And my family owns some property up on the Locust Fork, so I do have an affinity for that river. But when it comes to paddling, I love the Perdido River and rivers like that. I am not a whitewater paddler. I'm a bit, I'm not an adrenaline person, so I get a bit nervous when it comes to whitewater. So I prefer endurance over adrenaline. So the flat water, the black water streams like you find in the Delta and the Perdido, and some of those rivers down there are the ones that I like to get out on my kayak on. I see that there's
Unfortunately, you're doing very poorly on sizing right now. We will get on that quickly on those t-shirts.
We haven't ordered new t-shirts in a while. We would have probably ordered them before Water Rally this year, and then we had to cancel Water Rally. So, but yeah, we need to order some more for sure. So what's the biggest lawsuit we've worked on? It's probably that one I mentioned on the Coosa River. I mean, our organization has been involved in lawsuits before. I mean, I started in 2005, and they were involved in some pretty big ones before I started. But as far as from what I can speak to, while I've been here, the one with on the hydropower licensing on the Coosa River was a huge one. Like I said, we participated. There's a designated stakeholder process that takes years, where you comment and comment and comment and try to get the power company to do, and the Fish and Wildlife Service and everybody to do the studies to show the impacts the dam is having. And they didn't do much of, if anything, of what we were asking to see. They didn't give us the data we wanted to see. So when they issued the license, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued that license, we did not agree. They didn't change anything. It was just going to continue to, the largest mass extinction in modern history was the Coosa River when it was dammed up. And it killed, 30-something species of mussels and snails, and aquatic biodiversity was diminished significantly. So that's one of the reasons we were involved in that. And when we challenged the license, they didn't redo any of it. They didn't even do an environmental impact statement the first time around, and they still gave them a license to operate all those 7 dams the way they'd always been operating them. So we challenged that in court. It went all the way to DC. Southern Environmental Law Center, as our attorneys, did an excellent job, and the ruling was unanimous. 3 judges, was unanimous, and it was that they have to go back and look at the impacts that the dams have even before they built them. So that was a pretty big one. Their baseline had to go all the way back to when the dams were built, and they had to do an environmental impact statement and look at alternatives. They had to do some other pretty major things to improve on the conditions of the river and the license. So now we're back to the drawing board. Doesn't mean we have an answer yet. We have to just go back to the drawing board, but it was pretty huge. I think it'll probably be in law textbooks one day when it comes to environmental law, because it was such a big win.
That's really awesome. I'm glad. It's always good to hear the success stories. I know with my experience with a lot of these nonprofits that it's very hard because there's a lot of negatives, but there's those shining stories that keep you motivated. So yeah, I'll open it up. We're hit time, but if anybody has any final questions, feel free to ask. If not, I think we'll just tell Kelly and Cindy thank you very much, and yeah, hopefully, I think we're gonna try to watch one of your shorter documentaries next week. So we'll make sure to let you know how everybody reacts to it.
That'd be awesome. Thank you guys. Thanks for having us. I love that you guys are all interested in doing this. I wanted to echo when I was talking earlier, Cindy's statement about volunteering. I know it's hard. We're all short on time, and it's so hard right now, and we can't get out and see. But just offering to help some folks out, make sure you meet other people who know people who know people, and seems to be the way the world works these days. So I definitely encourage you guys to volunteer as much as you possibly can and get a paying gig out of it.
And I'll add to that, volunteering can be like, if you don't have a lot of time, it can be writing a letter to your legislator that, responding to an action alert that one of these organizations sends out, getting on their email lists, participating in some of the things that happen just sort of online in an advocacy world. Because one of the things I look at when I look at resumes when someone's applying for a job is if they've been involved in organizations. Can they say they're a member of the organizations and that are doing the things that they say? If they want to work in the environment, it looks kind of negative on their resume if they haven't ever been involved with in some way with environmental organizations. So just think about that when you're thinking about what you're, and like I said, in order to say you're involved, you can be on the email list, you can respond to action alerts. You don't have to necessarily have had some formal position. So I think it's important just to be sure you list those things when you're trying to get jobs in this field.
I agree.
Definitely great advice. I know that's how I kind of landed in the role I am now. So very grateful for all those opportunities. All right. Well, thanks, Kelly and Cindy. I really appreciate spending the time and getting to know y'all more.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.